everyone. Welcome to the Antalya Room here at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. My name is Melinda Nusafora. I'm your moderator today. I'm also a senior foreign correspondent at TRT World, based in Istanbul, originally from Australia. So it's a great pleasure to be joining you here. It's wonderful to have you at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. We've come together today to talk about the role of regional mechanisms. So, the world is more interconnected than it ever has been before, and yet it feels like we are going through a phase of such serious global disconnection. 2003 was undoubtedly a very tumultuous year. Global conflicts, Sudan, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, just to mention a few, record-breaking heat waves, droughts, floods, wildfires. In fact, the World Economic Forum released in January a global risk report that showed a negative outlook for the next 2 years. More than half of its respondents anticipate the next 2 years to be a period of instability with moderate risk of global catastrophe. Added to that, we have the US and some other Western powers in some areas appearing to abdicate their self-appointed role as global guarantors. So where does that leave us? These may be challenges, but this leaves us with great opportunity. And at a time when the international order is under pressure, regional diplomacy is offering a real chance to pursue mutually beneficial cooperation. From fostering new trade and investment opportunities to exploring mutually beneficial cooperation with states that share similar values and ideologies. Let me take a moment to introduce our panel who will be discussing this with us in depth today. As always at the ADF, we've brought together a really informed panel. We appreciate your time, all of you. First of all, beside me is Pornchai Dan Vivantha, the Secretary General of the Asian Cooperation Dialogue, Ambassador Konstantin Mikhail Grigori, the Director of RACVIAC Center for Security Cooperation, João Samuel Cajol, the Executive Secretary of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, and Bjorn Berge, the Deputy Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Thank you all very much for joining us. So, what is the role of regional mechanisms? Ambassador Konstantin, I would like to start with you. We had a chat actually before this panel about the role of regional mechanisms. Where do you see it playing an effective role with regards to peace and security?
Yes, of course. So,
just press that little button there beside you, that's it.
So just I want to tell you that among the area of topics we are focused as RACVIAC Center for Security Cooperation, main areas of interest of our organization are devoted to the arms control and non-proliferation. At the same time, regimes control and building confidence security measures. And at the same time, we are doing our best in order to foster the dialogue in this direction, countering terrorism, countering organized crime. Coming back to your question, so we are doing our best even in this situation, international situation, who now is facing threats and big challenges. So we want to continue our activity in order to improve the climate of cooperation, trust between our members, and to, like this, to bring our contribution for securing security and peace in Southeastern Europe and in Europe as well. In this respect, we are organizing a lot of activities. I would mention in this respect that despite the challenges the international infrastructure, the system of arms control are facing now, so are still organizing 2 events, very important events in this respect, conference and workshop devoted to the Dayton Article 4 and at the same time, Vienna document 2011. Like this, we are continuing organizing these events to do our best in order to strengthen the cooperation and to increase our contribution for securing peace and stability in Europe.
Thank you. Joan, the international conference on the Great Lakes region was based really on regional instability and conflicts. It's how it originally came about. What role do you think your organization plays in maintaining stability?
Thanks very much. First of all, I would like to thank the hosts, the government of Turkey, His Excellency Erdogan, for organizing this event, which is our first, because it allows us also to interact with this panel and the broader international community. As you know, the International Conference on the Great Lakes region is an organization which is a regional mechanism of the African Union for peace and stability. We represent an audience of 12 member states and a constituency of 400 million inhabitants. We consider ourselves to be the lung of the African continent because all of you have electronic gadgets, and the raw material for those gadgets, for the energy transition, for all the crucial target points for the next 50, 100, 150 years come from that region. And yet, it is a region also strife with instability, a lot of suffering. Everybody talks about Gaza and the Russia-Ukraine invasion. But did you know that there is a genocide in the Congo that has been going on for the last 30 years, which has affected more than 10 million inhabitants of this planet Earth? And it's nowhere in the international space. That's why we exist, and that is why our 12 member states and the UN, under the auspices of the OAU, thought it wise to establish the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will definitely return to your point about how stability interplays with economies and trade. We will definitely circle back to that after our panelists have had a chance to make some opening statements. Pornchai, talk to me about the Asian Cooperation Dialogue. Not all of your members are great friends, so how do you juggle cooperation and conflict?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel. And of course, your question is of interest to me and also to the audience. Well, this ACD or Asia Cooperation Dialogue comprises 35 countries, including Russia, where according to the UN categorization is part of Europe, but for us it's part of Asia. Anyway, I see it as a melting pot to achieve coherence, because we have countries in Asia from north to south, east to west. You said some may have bilateral conflicts with or among one another, but I see that this is the window of opportunity to try to open an avenue for conflict resolutions, even though the ACD is not a forum for political discussion, but this is just an avenue that is open to all. And the other point is building blocks for platform for building blocks from one to others, from regional, sub-regional to pan-Asia-wide context. And this is what I would like to emphasize through dialogues in order to find amicable solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And beyond the Council of Europe, talk us through how you visualize that regional mechanism fitting in with the promotion of peace, the promotion of stability within your region. Is it an effective player?
Thank you very much, Melinda, and it's really an honor and great to be here today participating in this panel and also to take part in this very important forum. When it comes to the Council of Europe, it's one of the oldest European institutions. And it was really established on the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that dates back to 1948, after the Second World War. And then to create a new Europe that respected human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, the leaders in 1949 decided to establish the Council of Europe with a base in Strasbourg in France, where I live and work. And I think in terms of building trust in Europe today, I think I will point out the importance of the European Convention of Human Rights, because that is actually the regional implementation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's built up as a very unique system. You don't find it anywhere else in the world. Because in Europe today, it doesn't matter where you live. You have the same rights, you have the same protection. And that is because you have the European Convention of Human Rights, but on top of it, you have a court that enforces all judgments, and it's an obligation for all the 46 European countries to implement these judgments. And that has created an harmonization again of the legislation when it comes to the respect for fundamental rights all over Europe. And this has been going on now for 60 years. So you can imagine the impact these cases have had on the legislation in the various European countries, and thereby also creating the trust, the cooperation among these countries, and also at the same time protecting the rights of you and me as individuals living in Europe. So maybe a reply to your question.
Yes. The interplay of trust in those circumstances is interesting. We'll circle back to it during our discussion. Zuan, let me come back to you now, talking about instability, the interplay between stability and peace and economic prosperity for a region. As a regional mechanism, as a regional body, how important is that duality?
Thanks very much. The importance of building trust in an environment of mistrust and lack of cooperation between neighboring countries cannot be argued more. And that is why the leadership of my organization under the African Union, with the support of the United Nations, thought that it would be critical to create an institution that galvanizes neighboring countries to see and set the need for processes and systems that bring them at the table to discuss the plight of their sub-region, because by building trust, we are able then to ensure and engage those conflicting areas affecting our member states peacefully in order to establish an environment of peaceful, neighborly coexistence. As I said, trust and stability are critical to making sure that we are able to ensure development, and prosperity, not only for the sub-region, but also for the African continent and the world. As I said, you all have the gadgets here. You all have access to this clean energy. My sub-region, if it were at peace, would be able to contribute positively to ensuring sustainable development for humankind, for all. That is how the interplay is so important to us. And we do it because we have systems, we have institutions, both political and economic, that can work together to make that happen. Thank you.
Ambassador Grigori, do you think that regional mechanisms can work with international bodies, or do they work instead of international bodies?
Well, it's a very good question. Thank you so much, dear moderator and dear Melinda. So really, we have to think if a regional mechanism body is able to cooperate or to hamper the global cooperation. No, in my idea, there is a real cooperation, and we as regional bodies, we can provide our contribution in order to increase the global cooperation. So complementarity, synergy is the key word in my understanding. And as far as RACFIAC is concerned, I can give you examples. We are doing our best in order to respond to the necessities of the member countries. I give you just 2 examples. So we are going to the conference of the parliamentary members of the Southeast European countries, or Dayton Article 4 I have mentioned. But at the same time, we are adopting the global agenda. I just give you an example. So CWD network became an area of interest of our organization. So we took it from the international, and we are respecting the international standards as well. So complementarity and synergy is keyword. Globalization in diversity, I must say. Thank you.
I saw you nodding when the ambassador started his comments. Did you want to add something, Joan, before we move on?
It was to confirm that we work together, hand in hand.
And Pornchai, what about with the ACD? Is there cooperation with international bodies? Do you feel like you stand alone?
Well, I don't think so, because in fact we try to cooperate within and outside the region as well. If you ask me whether it could supplement or complement international body, the answer is yes. I recall the United Nations Charter, which refers to regional arrangements, which provide mechanism to promote peace and security. So with that, and also given the notion of interdependence, no one can act alone, especially in terms of transboundary issues. So I do believe that regional mechanism could also support international mechanism. Then the next point I'd like to add to this is about, for the ACD, we start off with areas of common denominators, or in fact, to put it in another way, less controversial, namely 6 areas of cooperation, where we call them 6 pillars of cooperation. And if we could add another pillar of cooperation on trade and investment, that would be another aspect that would put the ACD to deal with the issue of bread and butter. So with that, I hope we are on the right track, and the reason being that we would like to create the environment conducive to cooperation, which inevitably lead to partnership and also development within Asia. Thank you.
Bjorn, one of the top priorities stated through the Council of Europe is to support Ukraine against Russian aggression. And yet not all of Europe agrees, not all of the European Union countries agree on how to go about that when we look at funding and aid packages. How does your organisation deal with maybe one common goal, but conflicting opinions amongst groups as to how to achieve that?
No, thank you for the question, Melinda. First of all, there are numerous conflicts around this world. I think my colleague mentioned some, and we also have the terrible situation now in Gaza. But for us, as the Council of Europe, of course, we have a focus on European crises and conflicts. And what we have done since the Russian invasion of Ukraine is really to support Ukraine in every way we can. And of course, we deal with issues related to human rights, democracy, rule of law. And also Ukraine needs to have these type of institutions functioning in a wartime situation. So we have supported with different programs the running of the judiciary in Ukraine, in how they can also support vulnerable groups, refugees, internally displaced. And we have done something very important as well, and that is to establish now a register of all the damage caused by the Russian aggression. Because if you want to have justice at one point, you need to register all that has happened, all the injustice. So we have established now, together with Ukraine and a number of other countries, the G7 countries, the EU, several countries across the globe, a register of damage. And this is going to be fully operational now with an office also in Kyiv, but also with the main office in The Hague in the Netherlands in next month. So I think this is very important. After having said that, you also need, of course, at some point to compensate the victims. So that's why we are talking about also a compensation mechanism. And of course, at some point also, we talk about the crime of aggression, which is really the worst of all crimes, you know, when political leaders take such a decision. We need also to be able to address this at an international court. So there has been discussion in a special core group with participation again globally, how to address this issue, to set up maybe a special court. So these are, of course, there are differing opinions, as you said. In Europe alone, there are 46 countries, but we also are relevant in some of these matters globally. So we work also with other countries, such as Japan, United States, Canada, many countries in the African Union as well, and in Latin America. So there are different opinions, but I think we have a firm conviction that we need justice. To do that, we need to register all the damage, we need to have a compensation mechanism, and we need also to, someday, to have some sort of a court dealing with what happened. So this, I think, we have a consensus on.
I'm not sure if this question is a little bit left field to you, but I had a conversation on stage yesterday with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, who said that the war between Russia and Ukraine can never end unless the US intervenes and makes it so. His opinion is that the US are the ones who can stop it. So with that in mind, do we need one big global power, you know, as the world police overarching everybody else? Or is there room for more regional mediation?
You know what we need? It's a well-functioning international structure. And you know, in the beginning almost, you know, after the Second World War again, the UN Security Council was given this task to preserve peace in the world. But that has failed over and over again. So we need to rediscuss this and see if there are other ways of establishing a more efficient structure in addressing these conflicts and wars that we see all across the globe. Of course, the United States plays a very important role as the main actor, many will say. But you have also many other actors, like China, like the European Union, the African Union, many other actors in the world today, also from the Latin America and other parts of the world. So we need to come together and really discuss how can we now, based on what we have seen now over and over again, have a better system in addressing these. Of course, there will sometimes be the big powers taking initiatives. It's unavoidable, especially now when you don't have such a system. But I think the aim should anyhow be to have a well-functioning system in the world today, preserving peace.
Ambassador Grigory, in your region, Southeastern Europe is also no stranger in the past to wars and modern-day tensions. Do you think that regional mechanisms are more beneficial with regards to mediating a de-escalation as opposed to having an outsider come in and impose, a negotiation between parties?
Thank you so much. So first I will come back to the previous question. We are also organizing a lot of events devoted to the war and the aggression of Russia to Ukraine. I will mention only two of these events we are organizing. So the Conference for Security Challenges in Europe, we have organized together. Again, we're discussing about regional cooperation and independence at the same time with George Marshall Center for Security Studies and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Germany, focused on the consequences of the aggression of Russia in Ukraine. And at the same time, another one, it's devoted to security energy, focused also on the consequences of the aggression of Russia and Ukraine on the security energy. And now coming back to your question, yes, I agree that we are able and we can provide our contribution as one of the voices at the regional level, together with the main actors, as was already mentioned here by my colleague from the Council of Europe in organizing such an activities. Well, Southeast Europe, we know very well, is facing with historical tensions. And of course, if you are looking to the members of our organization, you can see that among them, in the history, there were tensions and still existing. But we are trying in Iraq, in organize our activity to foster the dialogue in order to be the main tool in order to avoid tensions and to build understanding between our members, and like this, providing our contribution for security in Southeast Europe. I'll give you just an example in this respect. Some countries which are members of RACVIAC, so they don't recognize Kosovo. But as far as the participation of Kosovo to our activities, it was agreed all the decisions in RACVIAC are taken by consensus. So even 3 states don't recognize Kosovo. In this climate of cooperation and dialogue, in order to find acceptable solutions for all our members, it was agreed to invite Kosovo to attend the activities organized by RACVIAC, with the exception of 2 events which are connected with military aspects. But like this, it was, let's say, a proof of the fact that we are able to find solutions, even if we are facing historical tensions, and not only historical tensions, even tensions which we are facing now. Like this, it was a proof of fact that we can and we have to do this and to continue on the same way.
Yeah, you're right. Proof that it can be done, that they can work together. Pornchai, one of the objectives of the Asian Cooperation Dialogue is to foster cooperation amongst Asian countries to improve competitiveness on a global scale. So in a sense, several of your members are quite small, in an economic sense. Does it give them strength in numbers in that regard? Talk us through how, in a trade sense, a regional mechanism can promote more economic sort of benefits for perhaps a smaller economy.
Yes, this is the direction I hope we could proceed in that regard, because to begin with, cooperation has, according to my understanding, different tiers of action or activities, and regional mechanism help support cooperation because it's designed to meet the needs, challenges, and also capacity of that region. But of course, certain issues or aspects could not be dealt with at the regional level, but at the international level, because global or international mechanisms are meant first and foremost for standard setting, like climate change. Even regional mechanism, whether effective or non-effective, may not work alone, but requires international cooperation. So if we talk about complementarity or competitiveness, like trade, if one country could make the benefit or guided by comparative advantage, for example, we could focus on whatever we do best, rather than to produce or manufacture all that we could not compete. Regionalism or regional mechanism could follow suit. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you very much.
With regards to the Great Lakes region, if I can hand it back over to you, Joan, is there ever, there must be a risk or frustrations that you're seen as a regional body, not a international body or a continental body. I know that the International Conference for the Great Lakes region, for example, has been, calling for the withdrawal of armed groups from the DRC for a long time. Do you feel that your calls are given the same weight as if that call came from the African Union? I know you are a body of, but...
Well, who is the African Union? Who is the United Nations? It is us. The members of the International Conference on the Great Lakes are member states of the African Union. They are member states of the United Nations organization. We need, as human race, to see that our lives are interlinked. It is like a body. The world is like a body. If one of the parts is suffering, the body will fail. All we are saying is, to repeat the words of Bjorn, the international community needs to work properly, because it is not us and them, it is all of us together. That's why we formed the United Nations. That's why it is very difficult when you see a permanent member of the Security Council using armed way to invade a smaller country. You wonder what has gone wrong with the world peace order, as established in 1945, almost 70 years on. So to me, the debate is not whether it is the African Union which should have one voice or the international conference. No. All we need is to harmonize, better coordinate, and attribute roles and functions. I'll tell you why it is important for us to harmonize and work together. Because today we have what we call the Luanda Roadmap, which is a political and military roadmap towards establishing peace and stability in the Eastern DRC. And we have the Nairobi process under the aegis of the East African Community, which is a political mediation process. Hence, all armed groups which have been roaming around, not only actually in the DRC. I'll give you an example. When I recently took office in December 2020, a crisis ensued in the Central African Republic, and the rebels were almost at the doorway of Bangui, the capital. And the regional mechanism called the ICGLR, the International Conference, convened a summit of heads of state to send a critical message that we will not allow armed groups to turn the democratic process as established. It may not be perfect. It may not be agreeable to all. Good enough. If you have a political message in the Great Lakes, go to the Nairobi process. But we cannot allow this cyclic nature of crises in a critical sub-region of an important continent like the African continent to continue for the last 30 years, as I said. Hence, the international community under the UN and the AU need to supervise and come back to their critical roles that they were placed and established for, to help local initiatives under the local heads of state, the chair of ICGLR, the chair of the Eastern African Community. Let them lead so that we can bring peace and stability, not only in the DRC, but also in Sudan, also in the Central African Republic. Those are critical areas. We need to work together and not to work separately. All we need is to understand that we belong to the same human race, and peace and stability are factors sine qua non for our survival as a human race. Thank you.
Thank you. If only it was that easy, isn't it? You make it sound like it should be so simple.
It is not simple. I can assure you I am the executive secretary. But if you ask Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, or if you asked Madam President of the EU Commission, they'll tell you the same story. Multilateralism, multilateral institutions are as good as their member states.
Yes, we're only as good as the sum of our parts. We are fortunate enough in this particular session to have time for questions from the audience. So I wonder if there is anyone in the audience. We will be able to get a microphone to you to ask a question if there's any. There is a gentleman over on this side. We're just organising our microphone. We won't be. A moment. Just over on this far side there. Thank you.
Says thank you for the opportunity, and I would like to thanks to you for your contribution to the panel. Well, what I'm gonna ask is, especially for the Mr. Berg, as he mentioned about reconsider again the United Nations rules, because as he said that we cannot prevent the war in the world, as we saw in Russia, Ukraine, in Asia, in Middle East, and in America as well. So how do we prevent the wars instead of the gendarme or police? There is no police in the world, as you also said. and there is no higher authority in the world. So what I'm going to ask is, if, as you also said, that if the United States intervene in the Russian-Ukraine war, then the war will end. But it's also that there is a match interest with the United States. The United States doesn't want to end the war. So if it is not matched with United States interest, then how we will prevent the war? Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Bjorn, that's a million-dollar question. How do we prevent the wars?
No, thank you very much for a very good question, and it's going to be difficult to reply to it. But no, I think, as we said also earlier here, we have the UN Charter that gives a particular role to the UN Security Council to preserve peace globally. It has failed to live up to that task. And there are ongoing discussions, and been going on for many years, how to reform this system, how to maybe change the UN Security Council, how to increase the membership there. I mean, there are so many initiatives and discussions ongoing. But it seems very, very difficult. But this is our hope. This must be our hope, because this is what we need globally today. Having said that, you mentioned also the Russian invasion of Ukraine and certain US interests. I think US is a global power, and they can play a constructive role in helping to end certain conflicts today. I'm sure of it. So can also other major powers. But what we need now for Ukraine is really to follow the peace plan that President Zelensky has proposed. It has 10 very relevant points. And there's been ongoing discussions now, global discussions as a matter of fact, with over 80, 90 countries in working groups on all of these 10 main areas of discussions. So this is my hope today. How to end that war is to keep on working on these 10 points, gather the support of the international community, and then at one moment there is a need to sit down at the table, also with Russia, of course, and come to an agreement between Ukraine and Russia. But I think the peace plan that Zelensky has proposed is our hope today.
Would any of our other panelists like to comment on how regional mechanisms can affect an end to that particular conflict before we move on? Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to talk to the role of the US. If, I don't know, the audience and my colleagues, panelists are aware, when the US got concerned with the electoral process in the DRC in December, they were able to garner a ceasefire between the armed group of M23 and the Congolese government with the intervention of the Rwandan government in 72 hours. This is how critical roles and responsibilities can play if they are harmonized. In other words, if the US, with the sophistication of its intervention that it has, is able to contribute to those two platforms that I've mentioned, the Rwanda roadmap and the East African community-led Nairobi process, to make sure that the armed groups roaming around in the borders between Rwanda and DRC can go to those platforms and lay their grievances, things can happen. And that is how I think the international community should work together. Because remember, you are talking about development, environment, energy transition, modernization of the aerospace industry. Most of it, in terms of raw materials, is coming from there. If we work together, maybe we can achieve the stability that is desired to bring prosperity and development, not only to that subcontinent, but all over mankind. So I think we really need to work together so that the issues of cyclic crises can be brought to an end and we can concentrate on improving the greater wealth of mankind.
Thank you.
Yes, if you agree. if
Yes,
you allow me.
please, Mr. Ambassador.
So I fully agree with my colleagues. And with your kind permission, I would like to go back in history. Romans were saying, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for the war. And we can see that we have the war. Maybe it's time to review this formula. Si vis pacem para pacem. If you want peace, prepare for peace. Thank you.
Yes. The lady at the front here would like to ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your participation. You have talked and gave us many insightful points. I want to pose my question to all of you. The problem of international cooperation structures is the implementation of their policies, because countries are sovereign and you cannot force a country to do what you want them to. So how do you, in your regional structures, balance that the sovereignty of the countries and the implementation of your policies? Thank you.
Interesting point. Ponchai, do you want to start?
Yes, of course, if you talk about implementation, you are absolutely right that it's up to states to comply or even not to comply. But as far as the ACD is concerned, we start off with first political will to cooperate and also to even implement. That's the first point, without which forget about it. Secondly, consensus building, because consensus is like no objection, which makes sure that each and every country, whether big or small, could have its voice heard. And once consensus is not secure, then forget about it. I came from ASEAN, where we apply consensus since day one. Sometimes it worked out pretty well, but sometimes we spend more than a decade to come up to a solution. But that's the way it is. That's the way it is. Each and every country in ASEAN or ASEAN 10 has its veto right because of the term consensus. So with that, I would like to say that implementation could be effectively made out by states because they have their political will to do so. Of course, in accordance with international law and also rules-based principle, and also with consensus. And if we could achieve consensus, then why say otherwise at the stage of implementation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perhaps we'll go down the line if you addressed them all. Ambassador,
Yes,
what do you think?
So, for me, consensus is very important in responding to the answer you have raised here. And I gave you an example in Rakiak with the issue of Kosovo. So consensus is a veto right generalized. So it's an invitation for cooperation and for making efforts, even sacrifices for each state in order to be able to have an acceptable solutions for everybody. And like this, we ensure the possibility of implementation of these decisions. I will give you an example in this respect. So the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So OSCE, CCE, when it was, there were 3 years of negotiations who preceded the final act of Helsinki. But it was an act, again, for peace, for trust, and for respecting the rules. And we were able to do this many, many years. Now we are facing a big challenge, a threat, which is against the spirit and the letter of the Helsinki Final Act. So, but this doesn't mean that we have to renounce to this principle. This is, in my personal understanding, the only possible solution in order to create the possibilities of the implementation of the decision by all states.
Thank you. Please.
Indeed, that's why I said multilateral organizations are as good as their member states. Because if I were a member state, I would implement what at the multilateral level I have agreed to. In my organization, like others, decisions are taken by consensus. So if you have consented to that multilateral decision, you should implement it. You should make sure that in your own sovereign territory, that decision is being implemented. Because there is no other solution than cooperation. And all a long time, we have discovered that despite all the misgivings about multilateral organizations, we have never had a world war again. We have never had problems on massive destruction, except lately, as we already said, with the failure of the multilateral system. So, rather than us, the organization, responding, it should be the member states. Because if I don't want to do something, I don't make it happen. Why should I? So it is a co-shared responsibility between the member states and those multilateral organizations they have put in place. After all, they pay. I'll tell you, when I was in my country's cabinet, in my country of origin, Angola, and we saw that the UN peacekeeping mission was not up to what we wanted, we requested it to move, to go out of Angola. And we did it. Now, we are 22 years at peace, but with all the consequences of 27 years of civil war. Mankind should never, never allow what we are seeing in Gaza, what we are seeing in Ukraine. No.
To round out our last few minutes, Bjorn, take it away.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your very important question. And I think I very much agree with my co-panelists in what they have said already, but I think the basis of all the cooperation we see in regional organizations that we are discussing today is really based on goodwill that was said here, and also the willingness to cooperate in good faith. Of course, we know that, and we have to assume also when a country is joining a convention or signs a treaty, we have to expect that it's also willing to implement it. Otherwise, there's no point in signing that treaty or that convention. But it's not that easy in the world today. So in addition to that, to expect a certain amount of goodwill and good intentions, we also have to monitor what is happening in the various countries. And this we do actively in my organization, the Council of Europe. We have many groups traveling to all over Europe to monitor the situation when it comes to certain obligations, commitments that they haven't taken. But even monitoring is not enough. You also have to offer them expertise and assistance in implementing what they already agreed to. So you see there is a rather long process altogether. And I think this dialogue, this cooperation part, offering assistance, is going to be more and more important in the years to come, I believe, for different reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. It feels like the overarching sentiment has been one of cooperation, trust, faith in our neighbours. Let's hope that it perseveres. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I apologise, I can't take any more questions from the floor. Our panellists have other engagements. So thank you to our esteemed panellists and to you, our audience, for joining us. Thank you.
I really enjoyed